we'll talk about the 75 years of the Constitution with Ails Surya Prakash, the Vice Chairman of the Executive Council, Prime Minister's Museum and Library. He is also an expert on constitutional and parliamentary issues and author of What Ails Indian Parliament. Welcome, Mr. Surya Prakash. And let me begin this interview.
Thank you very much.
Let me begin this interview by asking you, the Indian Constitution, looking back over the last 75 years, how has the journey been, sir?
I think it's been an extraordinary journey, and our constitution makers have given us a constitutional structure, in my view, which really suits the Indian milieu. So a lot of effort went in those 2 years, 11 months and 14 days, I think, where they worked on the constitution, and they came together, put together 395 articles and 12 schedules in the constitution, and it seeks to address, it seeks to address the concerns of every segment of society. And I think the constitution has played a very important role in keeping the world's most diverse society united. So the unity and integrity of India and the social cohesion has been possible because of the constitution. In fact, our founding fathers had told us that equalization of opportunity is a must for democracy to succeed. And if you look at what we have done over the last 75 years, reservation in legislature and parliament for scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and so on and so forth. So this was the first step towards making our political democracy a social democracy, which was Ambedkar's advice to us, that just political democracy will not do. We have to turn it into a social democracy. Then reservations in the field of education, then reservations in government employment, then empowerment of women. As you know, by the end of this decade, we will have 33% reservation in parliament and state assemblies for women, which is a very, very critical step in terms of this equalization of opportunity which our founding fathers had thought of, and strong laws to end discrimination and exploitation. This was another aspect. And the point is that the founding fathers laid down terrain, as it were. It was for us to understand the significance of those provisions and the overall scheme of the parliament, and to overall scheme of the constitution, and to implement it.
Okay. So what is the contribution of the Constitution to India's survival as a nation?
I will say that its contribution is simply phenomenal. It's simply phenomenal for the following reasons. One is, as I said, converting this political democracy into a social democracy, equalization of opportunity. This is a constitution that provided for all of that. Then you have the fundamental rights. Then you have the directive principles of state policy to encourage the state to take actions which will promote the social, economic well-being of underprivileged sections of society. But before that, let me tell you, it's very important for all of us on this momentous day to remember the politics of the 1940s, where the Muslims of India demanded a separate Islamic state and got Pakistan on 14th August 1947. Then what was left of Bharat, the 88% of the population of Bharat after partition comprised of the Indic religions, that is the Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, and Jains. And what did they choose? They said, we want a secular democratic constitution and a liberal society. So that is what the work was cut out for our Constituent Assembly, and that is what was done. And India has retained this constitution because we are civilizationally democratic. I think these things, and the most important thing, look at the constitutions across the world, whether it's the United States of America, Australia, India, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Malaysia, take any nation. It is the majority that determines the content of that document. And therefore, the majority of India vis-a-vis 15th August 1947, we must always remember and give due credit to that majority for having given us all these rights and privileges under the Constitution and ensured equalization of opportunity for everybody.
Okay. So, what are the key features, if I may ask you, of the Indian constitutions? How would we describe our constitution?
Uh, we are, you see, Dr. Ambedkar said that we are a flexible federation. It's a remarkable mix and balance that they have done. While in times of emergencies, it can acquire a unitary tilt. Otherwise, the constitution is basically federal and the states have a lot of power. So under the 7th schedule, there's a division or demarcation of the legislative powers of the union and of the states. And this is done very neatly so that there is no conflict of interest there. And at the same time, in terms of war or in terms of an emergency, that is where the federal government gets activated. The constitution provides for that. We saw that during the COVID thing, when the Epidemic Act was enforced and so many other things. So I would say that this is a beautiful balance. It is not like the American Federation. It is unlike the scheme in Australia. And there are some very key features like the directive principles which balance out the fundamental rights. The other thing, a very important thing I must tell you as to why this is a momentous occasion for us, because our constitution is 75 years old. Because most constitutions die between the age of 15 to 19. The lifespan, mean lifespan of a constitution is 17 years in the world. And infant mortality is also pretty high. 7% of the constitution die before they celebrate their second birthday. So therefore, a constitution reaching 75 years is a remarkable thing, and the constitution has survived because we have civilizationally been secular and democratic, and we are at peace with plurality. The majority in this country is at peace with plurality and diversity since the Rigveda days. And that is why the constitution has survived, and that is why the constitution has the content that it has. And we must all understand that and respect that. Otherwise, we would not have articles like 14, 15, 16, 19, 21, 25, 26, 29, 30. And most important, as a nation, we are non-hegemonic.
Non-hegemonic. But there is also another important aspect. You have drawn an index of democracy after studying the Indian constitution. Yes. What are its key components?
Yes, I will come to that. So, while these are all the virtues of our democracy and virtues of our constitution, and we must always remember when we talk of the constitution that there is intense political diversity in the country. Over 40 political parties govern us in various states. And parties are part of the ruling NDA coalition and the opposite coalition. Then all the main religions of the world are represented in India. And the people of India speak 121 languages and 270 dialects. And we belong to different ethnic groups. And there are 8 states and 8 union territories, each having a distinct political flavor and sometimes distinct social flavor. And that is why the composition of the text of the constitution proved to be very critical. And that is why Dr. Ambedkar said, liberty cannot be divorced from equality, equality cannot be divorced cannot be divorced from liberty, nor can liberty and equality be divorced from fraternity. Without fraternity, liberty, equality would not become a natural course of things. It would require a constable to enforce them. I think the effort over the years has been to this whole idea in the preamble in regard to liberty, equality, and fraternity. The whole effort has been to really live that in the life of this nation and to get the people to live that
But,
liberty and that
but you know,
equality.
but Mr. Prakash, you know, can democracy be measured on this democratic index? Because then how do
Yes.
other countries measure up to it?
Yes, I'm coming to that. You see, having studied 80 constitutions across the world, we have come up with what I call an index of democracy. It has 8 elements. I'll just read it out and then we will discuss that. A full-fledged democracy must have the following 8 elements. One, an inviolable commitment to freedom of expression, freedom of conscience, and other fundamental rights. An unambiguous constitutional commitment to secularism. 3, separation of religion and state. 4, republican form of government. 5, constitutional right to equality before law and equal protection of the laws. And then, right to life and personal liberty, gender equality, universal adult suffrage. All these 8 essentials exist in the Indian Constitution. For example, Article 14, equality before law and equal protection of the law. That is what protects all citizens, you see, against any kind of ham-handed action by the state. Secondly, it also protects all of us in regard to employment, opportunities across the country, and so on. Article 15 says no discrimination on grounds of sex, caste, creed, religion, etc. Article 16 provides us the same guarantee vis-a-vis governmental jobs. Then you have all the freedoms in Article 19. Then Article 21 gives us the right to life and personal liberty. Then Article 25, 26, which is very critical to minorities, it says every person will have the right to profess, practice, and propagate religion. That is 25. And then to establish institutions for the purpose, churches and mandirs and so on. 26. Then 29 and 30 talk of preserving one's own language, script, and culture, the right, fundamental right. And then Article 30 gives us the right to set up educational institutions for the purpose. And the most critical part, Article 28, it prohibits the state, it prohibits any kind of religious instructions in an educational institution fully funded by the state. This is very important in regard to separation of religion and state. All this we have in the Indian Constitution. So let me now run through or put some of the other nations which are supposedly great democracies through this prism which I have described now. Take England, for example. England has a king is the supreme governor of the Church of England. You see, now the head of state there is a king. It is not like us, a president, an elected president, head of state, like in a republic. So England is not a republic. This is the first problem. Secondly, the head of state is the supreme governor of the Church of England. High-ranking members of the church are appointed by the king on the advice of the prime minister. So the prime minister is also involved in this. And he, he vows to uphold the constitution of the Church of Scotland. This is another thing as far as the King of England is concerned. So therefore, as far as we are concerned, Article 14, equality before law, Article 28, separation of religion and state, Article 25, freedom of conscience, these are all absent in what was regarded as the mother of democracy, England. Now, let's take some of the Nordic states which are regarded as the best democracies in the world. Take Norway. Here, the constitution says the king has to always be an adherent of the evangelical Lutheran religion. First of all, it's not a republic like India. So that's a minus point. Second, the king has to always be adherent of the evangelical Lutheran church. So the king is sacred and cannot be censured. So there's no equality of law. So therefore, there's no republic, and freedom of conscience is not there for the king, and secularism is absent, and
Okay.
there's no separation of religion and state. There are two more states I would like to cite.
Okay.
Take the case of Sweden. This is remarkable. Article 4 of the Constitution of Sweden says that the king shall always profess the pure evangelical faith, and princes and princesses shall be brought up in the same faith of the realm. Any member of the royal family not professing the faith shall be excluded from the right of succession. And Article 5, prince and princesses are not to marry without government consent. Otherwise, they will forfeit the right
Okay.
to succession.
I think
Now,
I got the drift. I'm so really falling short of time. But the question which
Yeah.
I want you to address is there has been a debate in terms of amending the constitution. What should be done next? There were clutches of petition which went to the Supreme Court on secular and socialist. They were thrown out, but then the court also said if the government of the day deemed fit, it should be done. Your thoughts on secular and socialist?
No, the idea that at that time the preamble ought to have secularism and socialism, I have no quarrel with it because we are civilizationally secular. Whatever meaning you may attach to that word, that is separation of religion and state, and not having religious practices intrude into the activities of state and so on and so forth, or in education and so on. We are adhering to it. So what if it is there in the preamble, and we are civilizationally in tune with plurality? Secondly, socialism. You look at directive principles of state policy, look at Article 39, 41, 42, and so on, where the state is given a strict direction by the Constitution to take up issues and causes for the benefit of the underprivileged. And it says that the means of production must be in the hands of the large mass of people. So
Okay.
this is a very important statement in the this thing.
Absolutely,
So
sir.
secondly, one other point I would like to make, you see, separation of religion and state. There are 47 Islamic nations in the world where that is not there. And there are so many nations like Argentina, Denmark, and so on, where there is no separation, and the religion is taught in schools and colleges. That is requirement constitutionally for them. So therefore, for all those nations to be put over India and to be designated as democracies, and for India to be pushed down the order with such a basket of fundamental rights for minorities is simply absurd. This is a moment when we celebrate the 75th anniversary of our Constitution. I would like fellow citizens to please understand what we have in our Constitution, and we must preserve
Oh,
that.
absolutely,
And
sir.
we must-
Absolutely.
we must
In
correct
fact,
it.
in fact, at the end, I would say that the beauty of Indian Constitution is its ability to adapt and adopt, unlike American Constitution or American democratic system, which is turning out to be a laggard. The toughest constitution to amend, where basic amendments don't take place, despite the best intention. I thank you, sir, so much for joining me on my show On Point on the 75th anniversary of Indian Constitution. Yes, Indian Constitution is diverse, vibrant, and a living document and testament of our democracy. So this was On Point, straight up with Mr. Surya Prakash, who has studied multiple constitutions, more than 3 dozen constitutions, and he, in this interview, built the contrast between them and Indian Constitution in context of rights and democracies.